Hello and welcome to episode 241 of the Paint All the Minis podcast. We put the show together so you have got something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your desk and painting your miniatures of any scale, genre or game. Our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with someone who's as involved in the hobby as you are on any level from top to bottom, because we genuinely believe that we've all got our own special, unique and individual stories which are pretty interesting to listen to. And if you don't find that stuff interested to listen to, probably at the wrong place. So sit at your hobby desk, paint your models and listen to the chat. We really do hope that you enjoy the content. This week I speak to Will Rahman-daultrey, the writer of Forbidden Psalm and The Last War, amongst other things. I'm not going to spoil any of the natural chat that occurs, but what I will say is that the richness of Will's own life, his experience, his perspective, and his mentality has leaked all over his rule sets, in my opinion, anyway. I really think that he's written games that, when you listen to his ethos and spirit, that they really echo the essence of life in some ways. There really is a charming mentality in them, the paradoxical allegory of what life and the journey of life is, mentally, if not physical, or maybe I'm just looking into it a little bit too closely and maybe I'm talking nonsense. I don't know. You decide, I guess. But what I do feel when I read his rule sets, when I look at the artwork, when I play the rule sets, I just feel that they're really rich and deep, and they give me many, many moments of pauses for thought, in positive and potentially negative ways too. Like, there's a terrible situations that he creates games in, but they're charming and a little bit funny and a little bit, lighthearted in a really terrible situation. And I don't know. It's really cool. I was really blown away just speaking to him and talking to him. And I want to extend a massive Paint All the Minis thank you to Will for coming onto the show, giving us a chance. We hadn't met before. We hadn't spoke at all previously, so I kind of messaged him out of the ether, and he said, yeah, he'd be delighted to come on. And thank you, Will, for coming onto the show. And I'm going to be moidering him incessantly until he's back on the show, and we can take some deeper dives into some specific gaming areas. Now we know each other a little bit. And when I say we, I mean everyone that's listening. Now we know him. We can moider him a little bit, and we can ask him some specific questions on some certain areas, because I think he'd come up with really interesting answers to those. But anyway, that is enough of the pre-ramble. I'll see you on the flip side for the post-ramble to figure out what's been going on over the last hobby week. But anyway, there you go. That's it. Let's go.
Paint all the minis. Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis, listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
What is good? To paint your minis, see them deployed on the table, and hear the lamentations of neckbeards.
So hey, I am here with Will. How's it going, Will?
Yeah, pretty good. It's quite sunny here.
Nice.
Which I usually hate, but
right. So firstly,
everyone else is happy.
Yeah. Firstly, where's here, and why do you not like the sun?
So it's Cardiff in Wales, which is not always that common. People kind of lose their minds when the sun comes out here, because we so very rarely see the ball of fire in the sky. That's part of the reason that I'm a very pale Welshman, but I actually have photophobia, which is a thing where I have light sensitivity in my eyes.
Right.
So bright light gives me migraines. So when the sun's out, I suffer a little bit. Yeah, so that's one.
So what do you do for holidays then, Will? Where do you go?
I just try and hide from the sun as much as I can. No, just kind of grin and bear it, wear hats, wear sunglasses, do the things that you're meant to do to try and protect your eyes as best you can.
Right.
Only recently discovered that the reason I was getting migraines is the photophobia.
Right. Okay. So what do you think it was? Just kind of like just life. He's like, I've got really bad headache.
I was like, I just get migraines. It's just a thing. Everyone gets them, right? And then went for like some eye appointments, and they were like, well, you're photophobic, so you might want to look into that a bit more.
Nice. There you go. That's cool, man. That's interesting. So Cardiff, Wales, through and through, or somewhere you moved to?
Moved here about 14, 15 years ago, previously from deeper into Wales. So from kind of the Neath area and the Neath Valleys and that area is where I kind of grew up and came over to Cardiff, 14 years ago.
So tell us stuff about Cardiff. What do you like about living there?
So Cardiff is like this weird amalgamation of a city that's not a city. It's got everything you'd want from a city, but the population is kind of quite small. It's only a few 100,000, so everything's contained within a really small walking distance, and it just makes it a really accessible place to get around and do things. But it's also got, a really great gaming store. It's got places to go, and I've got 2 kids, and it's great places to take the kids to. We get like good gigs going on, and there's good places to eat, and the transport links are good, and so it's got all the amenities that you'd want from a city, but without like all the people.
I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, because it's not reached that place where being in a city is quite annoying, because if you go to a city that's got a lot of people in, sometimes the infrastructure can't hold the amount of people, so you feel that kind of Cardiff has got that benefit of city but without too many people just cramming the streets and that, right?
Yeah, basically the only like downside to it is because it's a small, it's an old medieval town that's grown and grown, is the roads can't cope with the cars, so you get a lot of congestion and stuff. But I don't drive, so I don't give a shit about that.
Nice.
And, so I can ignore that bit. I can ignore the negative bit and just focus on the positives of like, hey, everything I can walk to in 20 minutes.
And then is that how you get around? You walk around? Is that an active choice, or is that something that just kind of happened?
Yeah, so I walk and cycle pretty much everywhere.
Nice.
It's a choice of both not being able to drive and then also having lived here for so long. It was like I didn't really need to learn, because most people will joke that it's quicker to cycle across the city than it is to drive, because it's just all our roads are way too small. I'm
the same. I cycle pretty much everywhere. Sometimes take the metro, like the underground train. But I try to cycle everywhere because it's free, and it's free physical activity. So it's like, why not do it? I kind of get it if it's like firing down with rain, or it's freezing cold, or it's quite dangerous. But generally speaking, try and cycle everywhere. It's pretty cool, man. That's good. So you kind of what you don't have to invest in a car and insurance, you invest in kind of sturdy walking shoes, right? That's kind of cool. I wish more people were kind of like that.
Yeah, pretty much, and a decent bike. That's the main investment instead.
Nice, super cool, man. So do you see that as you now? You mentioned you got children and stuff like that. So is Cardiff you, or is there another kind of pin on the atlas where you might potentially go in the future?
I think pretty much Cardiff. My kids love it here. My youngest in particular doesn't want to leave anytime soon. We've got them in schools in here, and they really love those. I think my eldest wants to go away for uni, but yeah, they very much love living in Cardiff, and then I love living here as well. Like I said, it's the first place I moved to that I was like, oh, I could live here and be happy living here. Coming from areas of Wales that were very deprived and didn't really have anything, I never really felt a sense of place or community. And in the Cardiff, it just has that in reams. Awesome. And so yeah, I think I'm pretty much I'm going to stay here for as long as I can, I think.
Awesome. That's really cool, man. So just before we move on, I need to ask the typical Paint All the Means question is if you were to recommend one food dish that's either Welsh or Cardiff does it best, what would you say that would be?
Oh man, so Welsh cuisine's interesting because Welsh cuisine, most of it is just where we took existing dishes and made them more complicated. Yeah. So our cheese on toast, for example, is just cheese on toast that takes an hour to cook. So it's kind of not easy. But my favourite Welsh food is Barabrith, which is it's a fruit cake that you soak the fruit in tea. Okay. And then you make the fruit cake, and it just has such a unique flavour and is just genuinely delicious. I mean, it's just a bunch of sugar and tea in a cake. So yeah, that's probably my go-to best Welsh food. Everyone normally says like Welsh cakes and stuff, but they suck compared to Arbroath.
Nice. So just before we move on to Cardiff, I must say that I've spent 2 of my most depressing afternoons in Cardiff when the Millennium Stadium was used for the playoff finals. I'm a big football fan, so my beloved Preston North End were in playoff finals over 2 years, within about 2 seasons within like 7 years, and playoff finals in Cardiff. One for playing against Bolton in the early 2000s, and one's playing against West Ham in the later 2000, like 2009 or 2010, and they were both just really excited for the day. Went to Cardiff Castle and kind of hung out, had a few beers, and got into the spirit. And then just the game went terribly, and then it was just depressing. So you kind of see a lot of sports people, a lot of sports fans come to the city and either exhilarated or depressed. You see that happen a lot?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, we have a lot of events in here. We've got, for a tiny city of a few 100,000 people, we've got like I think 4 or 5 stadiums. So we get a lot of different sporting events, and I live not too far from the Millennium Stadium. And so yeah, you see a lot of like both cheery faces and disappointed faces on a regular basis.
Those guys again. And does the city, and do you welcome those, or is it like kind of something you kind of suffer?
Like, most of the time it's fine. There are times where it's like, this is a ball ache. Sorry, my language is terrible.
No, it's okay. It pops out naturally. It's fine, mate.
The city kind of, like I said, we're a small city, so when you throw an extra like 100,000 people into the city, you feel it. It's easily avoided. You just avoid the center of town and just like hide out at home. The sporting events are actually pretty chill. It's like we had some big artists come and perform. That's more painful. Okay. Because it goes on for longer in the day. People are building up throughout the day. It goes on throughout the evening. And because it's such a small city and we're in this like valley, you can hear whatever music is being played across the city. So if you don't like the artist, you're kind of screwed.
Turn that record off.
Yeah. You're like,
just
great, I get to listen to Taylor Swift for 6 hours.
Well, there you go. There's a little bit of a snapshot of Cardiff, man. But we're not here just to talk about Cardiff, although we could. We're here to talk about the tabletop hobby. So for people who maybe aren't aware, people that haven't read the introduction, which is totally fine, you don't have to do the homework before you press play on the episode. So for people that aren't clued up, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now.
Yeah, so I'm the writer of Forbidden Psalm and the Forbidden Psalm line of games. So that's Forbidden Psalm, Last War, Dread Knights, Endless Horrors Between the Stars, and we've got a couple of new ones on the horizon as well. And been doing that now for 5 years-ish. And yeah, so that's kind of my background. Is they are small-scale skirmish war games, for those that don't know, kind of mix in elements of role-play games in as well. They grew out of, there's a Swedish role-play game that I'm going to butcher the name of because I always do. You think I'd have learned to pronounce it by now, but Morkborg, which is like death. Yeah, exactly. It's a death metal kind of tongue-in-cheek RPG. Comes out of the what's called like the old school role-play game kind of vibe. About 5 years ago, I reached out to them and said, "Hey, have you guys thought about making a miniatures game of this?" And they said, "No, you do it." So I did. Cool. And that's where it came from, because there's this open license, so anyone can make content for it, and then you don't have to get permission or anything. So I made the game, put it out as part of a thing called Zine Quest on Kickstarter, and it kind of just grew from there.
Awesome.
And yeah, we're on to the 6th or 7th iteration of it at this point, and it's really grown up. My background is totally different. I worked in charity sector for over 20 years on various different charitable projects, and the last few years it's mostly been about climate change. My background, academic background, is climate science. So yeah, and then
dude, that's proper ironic with your condition with the migraines, right? You've been focused on weather. It affects you. It's something that affects your life, right? So that's a really good snapshot, man. So that's cool. But you didn't just kind of wake up on a Monday morning and just do that stuff. It's not something that happens. You kind of build things up over a period of time with lots of trial and lots of error and lots of experiences and lots of likes and lots of potential annoyances, and that kind of, spits itself out into what you do right now. So if you were to kind of think about the first time that you started interacting with the hobby as we know it, be that board games, RPGs, or whatever, like not necessarily when you first started playing, but when did you first start becoming aware of this as a potential hobby or a potential activity that you could participate in?
Yeah, it goes back to when I was about 13, I think, was the first time I came across roleplay games as a kind of a concept, so like Dungeons and Dragons. And then I think it was about 15, I joined the Dungeons and Dragons group, and we were playing 3rd edition at the time. And then eventually became 3.5 and moved on from there. And played that for a solid decade. Before I really got into miniatures gaming. And that was, I think I did on and off for a decade throughout my teens. Kind of helped me get through some pretty shitty periods of time. Definitely was like the community I had of fellow nerds. And that's what kept me interested in that kind of side of the hobby. And I've been more of a role player. I've done more role play than miniatures games throughout my life. And then got interested in miniatures gaming kind of mid-20s.
So let's dig around with the RPG stuff then. So you said you became aware of it at 13. Can you remember your first interactions with it? And then can you remember the first steps into actually playing and how that was? Was it a school group? Was it kind of siblings or anything? Or was it friends? How did you first start getting to know it? Was it like a TV program? And then also, how did you make those first steps in playing? And can you remember your first playing experience?
So the first time I came across it was actually in our school library. They had a Dungeons and Dragons book, and I didn't have a great time at school, so I used to spend most of my time hiding in the library, either reading Terry Pratchett books or came across this Dungeons and Dragons book, and that was my first introduction to it as a concept. And then the first time I played was a few years later. There was a bunch of the alternative kids, the people that didn't quite fit in. We'd all hang out outside of a bloody Morrison's of all things, on the steps of it, and that was where our first group formed. There was someone that was older, I think he was in college, kind of asked if we wanted to play. We all joined his group, and we started playing. And my first character was a rogue, and kind of being a teenage idiot, didn't really know what I was doing. My rogue got killed pretty quickly, and that was the first experience of playing. Was this group of misfits kind of coming together to play these games.
Cool. And how seriously were you taking it? Was it something that you were sticklers to the rules and the campaign and the growth, and who was DMing, GMing, or was it much more just kind of something to do for a bit?
Yeah, I think it was we didn't take it that seriously, to the point where mid-campaign he got bored of running fantasy and decided he wanted to do a Star Wars thing. So all of our characters got magically transformed into Star Wars characters. And I was hang on a minute, I'm basically just a dude with a knife and there's space wizards. Oh god. Remember it very clearly being I am very much outclassed. The other characters have lightsabers and I have nothing.
You got some coarse language.
Oh god. Yeah, I was the worst version of I was Han Solo with no charisma. I was just how the hell do I even compete on this level? And that was our first. So we didn't really take it that seriously.
Yeah.
I have a very distinct memory of one of the people playing was making LARPing stuff. They were older, they were 19 or something, and they were making a LARPing sword, and they were painting this liquid latex on it, and it stank, and we all just got high off the fumes of this liquid latex while pretending to be Star Wars characters.
But that probably enhanced your game experience, though, I probably think, right?
It felt kind of fitting that someone was making a fake sword.
So you mentioned that you kind of dipped in and out, and you kind of did different things. So was it always RPGs, or was there other games involved too? And you mentioned that you'd been involved in charity work, and you mentioned is it weather science, so that suggests a university degree. So did you go off to college and then university?
No, so I was working full time. So I went into full time work from the age of 18, working in community development, which was a field around going into the most kind of deprived areas of Wales. It was a project the Welsh government funded, and kind of helping local communities overcome problems that they faced. So you would work with the communities to identify what their biggest issues were, and that really ran the gambit from like no access to green spaces and environment, all the way to like people's dogs crapping everywhere, and they need to fix that. So you would then put an action plan in place, and you'd help the community work through it. So while I was doing that, I then did a degree at the same time. So I was doing nighttime studying. So I did a full-time degree while working full-time. Did a degree in climate science and oceanography, just because it took my interest. And that was it. Yeah, so I didn't go away because I was working full time, and also had a young kid at the time. So
hey, more power to you, man. That's amazing. You know, I sometimes struggle to think about what I'm going to do with my Saturday, and I'm like, do you get out of bed? I don't want to get out of bed. And there's you know, rocking a career and also rocking a degree scheme at the same time, man. That's awesome. So I guess you weren't playing much during that time. You mentioned family and but wanting to, or did it kind of just fall by the wayside? You forgot about it all?
Yeah, I wanted to. It did fall down for a few years. There was a good 5-6 year gap where I didn't really do any gaming of that kind. You know, played some PC games.
What did you play? What PC games?
A lot of Left 4 Dead.
Okay, cool.
That was like my go-to. We had a group that would play it. So like downtime in between reading about the oceans, I would jump on and play a quick game. And then from that, I kind of got back into gaming through board games originally, and some role-playing game coming back in. Found an online group a couple of years back, probably, I don't know, 8 years ago now that I started running, 8-9 years ago. Just via like Reddit and stuff, wanting to run games again, and got into running games again that way.
So RPG games, so being the GM, being the DM, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned board games. So what as you first started, kind of the gaming renaissance, let's call it that, right? So during the gaming renaissance, what board games were you picking up? What were you playing? What was picking your interest?
Yeah, so I think the first two board games I bought were one called Elder Signs, which is like a dice push your luck kind of game, and then Blood Rage, which was a Viking minis game from Cool Minis or Not, and it was like the first minis type thing I'd bought. And I was like, I should learn how to paint, because like one of the things I don't sleep a huge amount. I never really have, so having stuff to do in the evenings was always like quite important. So that when my studies finished, it was like I suddenly got all this free time. So then I was like, I should learn a new hobby. Let's learn how to paint. That's the thing I can do. So I painted those minis as my first minis I painted, and then getting into the minis hobby kind of spiraled from there.
How did you find painting for the first time? What did you use, and how did you feel about the finished product?
Yeah, so I used, and this is no discredit to where their current products are, but the kind of original Army Painter paints, which were terrible. I found that they didn't hold their consistency very well. Took forever to mix, that kind of thing. Used those, just some cheap paint brushes. And I recently replayed that game, having not played it in I don't know how long, and was actually quite surprised by the quality that I achieved on those minis. I was like, oh, this is actually better than I thought it was going to be. I thought this was going to be way worse, remembering back. So I was like, oh, I've painted worse stuff since then. It's actually not that bad.
Were you seriously doing it, or were you just messing around?
I treated it like I wanted to learn a skill.
Good.
That's kind of how I approach most things, is like, I want to learn how to do this properly. And had fun with it. And then from there got into the miniatures game Infinity. Which I played for a few years, which was funny because that...
Go.
I was going to say, it's like the most complicated miniatures game.
That's what I was going to say. How did you find that?
Yeah, it's super complicated. The rules are really dense, and the interactions of the rules are really dense, and the minis are some of the most fine detailed minis out there. So learning how to paint such fine detail kind of pushed my painting forward, and also just learning how complicated the rules were and all the different interactions also pushed me into thinking about rules and how you make a game, and how do you make a game fun, and it also kind of the game is incredibly competitive. There's like a whole leaderboard, and at one point I was in the top like 10 people in the UK playing the game because they keep this like ranking. I didn't know this at the time because I didn't even know that there was a ranking system. I was just going and playing in tournaments, and then doing decently well. And then it was like a friend of mine was like, "Hey, you're quite high up the rankings." And I was like, "Oh," but I wasn't actually enjoying competitive playing. Like it was this funny thing where I was like decent at it, but kind of hated it at the same time.
Why?
It makes for a less fun game when you're against your opponent. So it just felt like you're not there to have fun. You're there to just beat somebody, and the game itself feels that way. It feels very competitive. It's all about competitive play, the way they structure the game, the way they balance the game. So even to the point where there are things in the game that you're like, narratively, you've set this character up to be a certain way, but actually on the tabletop they play very differently because they have to for competitive reasons. Yes. And I played that for a few years and just kind of got really tired of that competitive nature, and just I played in tournaments where people were so serious about it, and I took it very seriously for a period, and then realized and kind of reflected and was like, what the hell am I doing? I'm playing with toy soldiers. And that kind of pushed me away from that more towards narrative and back to my roleplay roots.
Okay. Were you playing RPGs at the same time as that, or did that not exist at the same time?
No, I was. Yeah, I still had an RPG group that I was running. Okay. And just the contrast between the silliness and the fun and laughter in the roleplay game, where you felt like you were playing with people, to the tabletop game where it was like, I feel like I'm playing against somebody. Yeah. And that there was like a very big swing in the experience.
And that's fine. It's horses for courses, isn't it? It's about what people, some people like Marmite, some people don't. Some people like Twiglets, some people don't. Those are both terrible foods if you don't know what either of those are. But you might like them, which is fine. That's cool. But it's good to have that experience. How did you get involved in Infinity? Like, was it something that somebody introduced to you, or was it something that you just thought, that looks really cool, I'll give that a whirl?
Yeah, I went along to the local gaming store, a place called Firestorm in Cardiff.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, it's a big online store as well, right?
Yeah, they've got a huge online presence. I think they've got stores in a couple different cities now as well, but they started in Cardiff, and like really big, like they had a warehouse that was theirs, and they had this like loads of gaming tables, and I just went along to like buy nerd supplies and got talking to someone there, and they were like, oh, have you heard of this game Infinity? And they, there's a local group, kind of got playing it through there, met some really lovely people through it as well. And it was funny as well, because there's all these lovely people that, when you're away from the tabletop, are the nicest, sweetest people, and then you get to the tabletop and suddenly they're ruthless cutthroats. Yeah. And I don't mean that disparagingly, because I was.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And like that was like how I got introduced to the game that way, and the models appealed to me. And then so did the setting and the story. But then what I found was, like a lot of miniatures games, the story that's like wrapped around the game doesn't come into fore on the tabletop.
Doesn't transfer.
Yeah, they're almost two distinct experiences, and it's why you've got people that will read every single Black Library book from Games Workshop and never play the game, because there isn't a direct translation all the time from book to tabletop of that experience. Yeah,
when you do get that experience in games, it is really good. Like a game that I really enjoy, Star Wars Legion, does that. It's like Darth Vader does Darth Vader-y stuff, and if you do Darth Vader-y stuff with Darth Vader, you'll play better, and I like that. So I like games that have that translation. That's really cool. So what you mentioned when you were talking about RPGs, you mentioned it was like a fantasy RPG, and then you also talked about like a Star Wars based RPG. So when you started picking up RPGs again, especially doing DMing and GMing, what were you playing and why?
Yeah, so a range of stuff. So I've got one group that over the years is very much focused on the kind of traditional fantasy Dungeons and Dragons or adjacent games. So we're currently running Pathfinder now, but they've also dabbled in other games. So we've played a lot of the indie RPGs like Mothership, Morkborg, 10 Candles, stuff like that, which are more experimental in their gameplay approach, sometimes a bit more fun and funny, take themselves a little bit less seriously in places, and played a lot of that as well. So different gaming groups I've played with over the years have kind of gravitated towards particular themes or particular stories and settings more than others. And I've kind of always gone with the flow of the players and what they enjoy, because I just quite like telling stories and playing games.
Yeah.
So I'm like not as like beholden to one specific setting or than another. And so I've got a gaming group now doing Pathfinder at the moment. I'm also running a group playtesting a game I'm writing and that's coming up in the future. And then I've got a group that meets very infrequently but tends to do more like one-shot stuff. So games where you can be very silly, very off the wall, because long-lasting consequences aren't really a concern.
What do you enjoy about GMing? And would you say it's kind of taught you anything? Has it helped you out with anything about being a DM?
Yeah, I really like storytelling and like collective storytelling, so where you work with other people to come up with a story, and the fun that brings, and the laughter and silliness, and just that pure emotion from being a grown adult but telling very ridiculous stories and playing very ridiculous things. And having that kind of mindset of going in of like, I'm here to have fun and tell a story, not to win, not to compete, but just to have fun. And being the GM, being like kind of to some extent a bit of the facilitator of that fun, I find quite an enjoyable experience. Working with others and helping them. So like a lot of the time when we do the one shots, the players won't necessarily know the rules of the game we're playing, because it's not that important. They just want to tell the story and have fun. So getting to facilitate people's fun is, a hugely enjoyable experience.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. And so before we start talking about how rules writing became a thing, have you got like a kind of standout experience of your RPG time that's kind of like one of your fondest memories of the effort and the time that you put into DMing or playing these games?
Yeah, so I had one which is a friend of mine when we were younger, when we were teens, had created a character and wanted that character to become a god, and that was his character's goal, was that this character wanted to ascend to godhood. And unfortunately that friend passed away, and kind of recently I was playing a game and brought his character in as an NPC, and the players actually helped the NPC ascend to godhood.
Mate.
And I didn't tell the players that this is what was happening or where this character came from until after the fact. And that was just such an enjoyable experience of getting to take this person's character and kind of achieve that goal that he wanted to achieve, but before he unfortunately passed away. So that was a really wonderful experience. And then like getting to explain the significance to the other players, and them like being like really happy that they'd been able to engage and take part in this like thing for this player's character. That was quite an awesome moment.
Did you ever think about telling them how important this might be or what you wanted to do? Because they could have potentially said, no, we're going to fight against that, we're not going to let that, and that might have been a bit of a dampener. But
no, because the whole point of his character is he was basically a bit of a trickster asshole. And it doesn't really have a right to be a god. So the whole point was that this NPC was essentially tricking them into helping him.
Right.
And that was part of it. So like telling the players that would have been, it might have prevented them doing it, or might have like seen through what he was doing. So it was kind of like it had to be kept stum until the point that I could reveal it and be like, and then the players and the characters also found out, that, oh god, we shouldn't have been helping this character necessarily. Like he doesn't necessarily have the most altruistic motives. He just wanted some power.
That's really cool, man.
And then all the players actually going, that's kind of awesome that this happened. And then that's become like canonical to the world we're playing in, that there is now this god that they can interact with, and one of the players is now playing a character that kind of worships him. And so that's quite fun.
Those little cool stories and those shared experiences that, in my opinion, are what life are about. And it doesn't matter whether those shared experiences is a grand or tiny, or it's just maybe a knowing look on a train, or it's like a months or years long RPG experience. But those kind of shared stories and share experience are what make life richer, right?
Totally, fully agree with that.
That's cool, man. So you talked when you were playing Infinity about it made you start thinking about rules. So when did you start messing about with that, and when did you think that you could potentially put your own rule set out there?
So I've probably always messed around with rule systems that I played with. So I've always homebrewed stuff with players, and because there was always something in a system that someone wasn't happy with, or they wanted to change, or the character they had in their mind didn't quite fit the rules that we were playing. And my view on it has always been, well, it's our game, so we can change what the hell we want. And then from that, I started playing Morkborg as a roleplay game. Really loved it. Started kit bashing minis for it, and was like, oh, I want something to do with these minis. And then COVID happened, and it was the kind of COVID hit. We went into lockdown, and I started writing the first game. And that's where it kind of started. It was something to do in the evenings to keep me sane. And it kind of spiraled from there. And then I started talking to some people, and they were like, oh, you should share it. And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe. And I did, thinking it wouldn't really go anywhere. And then it kind of took off and became my career. Weirdly.
Nice. That's cool. That's really, really good. So, were you apprehensive at the start about sharing it? Because I've spoken to numerous different people who've wrote many different games, and some people are like very open. It's like, yeah, just share it with everybody. It's fine. And then some people have been a little bit wary of sharing it, and think about IP theft or mechanics, being like. So we just, it's fine. Were you apprehensive or just completely open door policy with it?
Super apprehensive. I nearly deleted the file multiple times with like imposter syndrome and. And then I was like, actually, do you know what? If one other person gets enjoyment out of this, then I'll be happy and it'll have been worthwhile. And that kind of pushed me through enough to share it.
So when you were creating it, when you were writing it, was the intent that you seem to have with RPG and where you're just trying to facilitate people have a good time? Did that come through in the decision making process when you were thinking about what to include and what not to?
Yeah, so a big element of the games and the kind of core concept is fun through failure, and that came from playing a Necromunda campaign and basically having a miserable time because I lost hard straight away at the campaign, and then with Necromunda, I don't know if you've played it, but you have this snowball effect where suddenly you are under-equipped, outgunned, and that's the status quo, and you never can really recover, and it doesn't really have good recovery mechanics within the game. It has some systems that are meant to try and balance, but they don't seem to, at least my experience was they didn't really work in that way. And I wanted a game where when bad things happen to you, you actually found it funny, you enjoyed it, and there was no real cost or consequence. And that was the kind of core with Morkborg as a roleplay game. Is you have this character, you're in this horrible world, like I don't know if you know the setting, but it's end of the world is ending, you cannot stop it, all you can do is try and muddle through. You play absolutely irrehensible characters who are just trying to do whatever they can to survive each day to day, and they will probably die. Your characters are disposable. You making a new character is pretty quick. And that was the kind of concept that then went into the miniatures game Forbidden Psalm. The first one I did was that idea of, okay, when your characters die, you get another one for free. There's no cost to recruitment. And actually, the enjoyment of having the characters is the feats and flaws and the stories that you can tell about them. So, on the Discords for the game, we have a whole thread that's just the Rest in Peace thread, where people just come and tell about the horrible ways their characters have died and how much fun it was. And that definitely fed into the design ethos of the game of, losing cannot feel like losing. It needs to be, losing is just part of the story you're telling. And having fun with it in that way. So I wanted to kind of get away from that competitive side and go, and not that, discrediting anyone that enjoys that element of war games, like fully respect that. I've enjoyed it at times, but with these games I wanted to lean more into narrative storytelling, kind of a hybrid of like role-play miniatures gaming, and a game where just like losing doesn't really cost you much. It's just more about the narrative of it, and you might lose a character that you really liked for some reason, but you've got another character coming along the way to tell stories about as well. And
that's cool, man. That's really good. So let's stick around with Forbidden Psalm and let's kind of talk specifically about that. So for people who maybe haven't heard of that before, for people that have maybe seen it in passing, because we all have a lot of games and there's a lot of people that are kind of shouting for our attention, and it's very difficult to navigate a time out which games do we get involved in and which games we can't. So give us the elevator pitch about Forbidden Psalm, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So it's the first game for Binsam it's a miniatures game set at the end of the world. You play with a warband of 5 characters who the first thing you roll for in the game is their flaws and feats, which is like one negative thing about them, one positive. The negatives could be that they're malnourished, that they are obsessed with collecting socks. It could be that they are, their feat could be that they're really good at ranged combat, or that they're a spellcaster or something along those lines. And so you create these characters, you randomly generate certain aspects of them, you equip them with some equipment, and then you go out on adventures. And it's a narrative game, so there is in the core book there's 25 narrative scenarios that all connect as a story. You can play them as one-offs, or you can play them as the whole story. You start working for a mad wizard called Viroprix, who is one of those people that is obsessed with socks. He sends you out to collect socks for him at some point. He sends you out to get mushrooms for tea. He also sends you out to try and stop the end of the world. There's also questions about whether he's even actually a wizard, or just some dude in a tower. But you work for him. Your warband goes out and does these deeds. There's NPC-controlled monsters that you fight against. The games can be played solo, co-op, or versus. Played on a 2x2 surface area, so it's like small-scale wargaming, so you can do it in the house on a coffee table. And all of the decisions around it was around like making it accessible for people to play at home, or in a kind of a simpler setting.
Mm-hmm. And when did you feel like you were onto something? You mentioned being a little bit apprehensive of sharing things with people. So, like, when did you think, there's something in this? This is good. And were you playtesting just yourself? Did you farm it out to a few different people that you trusted and respected, or was it literally just thrown out of there blind?
Yeah, I had some friends that I playtested it with. I playtested it myself. I put a playtest version out. It was when I started getting like people's stories coming back about the game, and they weren't talking about the rules. They were talking about what had happened on the story, which was like the whole goal of this for me was like, how do I help people create interesting and fun narratives while they play? Yeah. And it was people coming back and being like, this guy got killed by a goose, or this guy dropped his weapon 3 times in a row and then ran away. And it was those kind of events of people coming and telling me the fun they were having with it, and seeing like the enjoyment that people were getting from the game. That made me think like, okay, this might be something here that people might be interested in.
How did you feel when people started doing that?
Kind of overwhelmed. Like I said, a huge imposter syndrome. So when it was like people positively reacting, I kind of don't really know how to react. Like I went to my first Gamescom last year, Games Expo, and there were people coming up and saying like how much they enjoyed the game. Some people asking me to sign things. The first person asked me to sign a thing, they were like, "Can you sign the book?" And I was like, "Why?" And I just like it didn't even click in my head as that's a thing that people would want. I was just like, why do you want me to ruin your book? And it was just like, so kind of just a bit overwhelmed by the positive feedback, but also like very heartwarming, and kind of just made me feel very like glad that people were able to see what I was trying to do with the game, and that it was actually incurring the response I was hoping for. And when I got that first bit of feedback of someone saying they enjoyed themselves with it, that was like, okay, tick, mission achieved. One other person enjoyed that. I've done a good thing. And then from there, it's spiraled with incredibly positive feedback. More and more people getting involved in the game and playing it. There's been events run. The book has been translated into French now. It's just kind of grown and spiraled into this kind of in a way that I just couldn't have expected it to.
That's awesome. That's really cool, man. It's really great when you, like you're saying, you're getting that feedback from people who've enjoyed it and people that have spent time in that world, that you've kind of created and fashioned, and that people are spending time in it and enjoying it. That's really cool. So as you kind of wrote the rules, you mentioned it was like a COVID. It first started during the COVID times, the dark COVID times. How long does it take to make a game? How long did it take for you to make your game?
It probably took about 2 months to write, the first book, and then iterations with playtesting and feedback. So I think from the Kickstarter that we did as part of Zine Quest to it actually coming out to people was about four months or so. And then we we had other versions of games come out and other things come out, and then we went and revisited the first game. So the timeline was I did the first game, I then did a game called Last War, and then I did an expansion to the first game called In the Footsteps of the Mad Wizard, which was a big book expansion that added more scenarios and continued the story for people. And we basically, about a year or so ago, combined that first book and the expansion into one book and put that out. We did a Kickstarter for it, and it raised about 100,000. There was like 2,000 people backed it. It was crazy, like, successful. And of course, we made iterations to the game then as well. So it does feel like the game has been tweaked and kind of poked at for that entire duration. The core rules have stayed pretty consistent. It's more just like we've tweaked some of the wording, or where we've had feedback where, you know, you write a rule and you think this is really obvious, and then someone else reads it and interprets it a different way, and then you realize it wasn't as obvious as you thought. And you're like, actually, that could be better written. That happens, you know, consistently throughout all the games that I've done. And yeah, going back and like making some edits and some changes to the original happened then a year and a half ago. So theoretically 4 months. Actually, you know, it's it just keeps going.
How has it been? You mentioned that you now do it full time? Is it a full-time job? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've been doing it full time since end of last year. So only, you know, 4 or 5 months at this point.
How has that transition been? And was it a difficult decision to step away from something that you could potentially see as something that's more solid into something that potentially could be a little bit more not solid? Like, was it a no-brainer? Yeah, of course I'm going to do this, or was it a big decision to step away from that full-time employment?
Yeah, so it was kind of a decision that was. So I worked in the charity sector where funding is always up in the air, and you never know if you've got a job 6 months later. So it was a case of I've always lived with a certain uncertainty in what I do. So it didn't quite feel the same as like giving up a career in that sense. And I've still been keeping my eye on and work in the charity sector because I think I just genuinely have a passion for it and love of doing. So at some point I might pick up a part-time something here or there, but at the moment just kind of focusing on the writing. So it didn't feel that big of a transition in that sense. It was the hardest thing I've actually come to terms with is like this doesn't feel like a job, and trying to even though I spend, you know, hours and hours and hours on it, it doesn't feel like how a paid job did in the past, like when I was employed for someone else.
And it's a bit sad we think in that way, isn't it? Does that kind of make sense? I feel very fortunate to be in a job that I do love. Would I go there every day? Would I set off at 7:30 a.m. every day if I wasn't getting paid? No, but would I still do it? Yeah. If someone just like completely got rid of jobs and they were like, you've got to find something to do, I would still do what I do. I just maybe wouldn't do it every day or all of the time, but I still do it. So I feel really fortunate, and it's kind of great to hear you say that. That you're kind of, it doesn't feel like a job for you too. But it makes me sad for like just kind of society in general that we have this negative connotation with the word job, and I kind of just think I kind of really wish we would, as a human race, kind of push back against that a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the biggest thing for me is not having a boss, because obviously every other job I've had, even when I was quite senior in an organization, there was still someone I answered to, and having now a situation where the only person answerable is to me is like, that's quite a weird experience of like, what am I going to do today? What do I want to do today? Like, it's that kind of thing, instead of like, what am I going to do today? Oh, what do I actually need to do for the job? And not to like sugarcoat over that there are parts of doing this as a living, like there's admin, there's sending orders out, there's all sorts of things around it that are the less fun bits, but it's still very much like I kind of get to dictate what I do day to day now, and that's been a unique experience for me, and I think that's been the hardest actual transition, is kind of convincing myself this is a job and getting myself, and and it does speak back to that thing of like, unless work has stress, unless work has strife, unless it's a pain, it's not considered work. And it's like, actually, that is a really terrible indictment of capitalism and where we're at, that work has to be miserable.
No, it's a means to an end. I think it's a means to an end. So it's figuring out what your end is that you'd like to get to, and then the work is the means to kind of get there, right?
Yeah, and I do think that is a shame that we've got that kind of negative viewpoint of work, and like, the alternative is obviously in the I worked for a very long time in the charity sector, and that has almost an alternative problem, which it's referred to as passion exploitation, where the charity sector wages are crap, your conditions are crap. Like working in the charity sector is actually kind of a miserable thing to do for many reasons, but you do it because you're so passionate about the causes that you're involved in. So you really care about what you do, and you might love what you do, but then you accept all these other conditions around it, around like the pay being less and things like that. It's funny, you see articles about charity sector like bosses getting paid a huge amount. It's like actually the average charity sector boss is on like 35-40k, and they're director of a huge organization potentially and have a lot of responsibility, and they're paid quite a low salary really considering the responsibility levels. And you see that a lot in the charity sector, but they do it because they're so passionate. And even that feeds back to like how we view work, and because the work isn't something they hate doing, they're paid less.
Exactly.
If your reward is that you're doing something you love, it's like, well,
both would be nice. So you mentioned we quite a lot in terms of publishing and creation, but is it we or is it just you?
It's mostly me. I work with an absolutely fantastic publisher. When I started it was just me. I obviously worked with some artists to do art who I commissioned or had various arrangements with, I can chat about in a minute. And then the publisher Exalted Funeral, my first publisher, picked up the books. And I met through them Jared Crader, goes by Jurt. He has done the editing on like 90% of indie RPGs that you'll find on shelves these days. So he's been involved in Mothership and others, so very well connected in the industry. He broke away from Exalted Funeral, set his own company up, Space Penguin Inc., and moved over to working with him a couple of years ago. So he's now my publisher. He is my long-standing suffering editor, dealing with my terrible spelling, and also helps me publish the books, helps me distribute them in America and to retail in America. And so that's the kind of partnership now that I'm still using. So he helps in terms of getting the books out there, but in terms of the writing, it's 99% all me.
That's really cool, man. It's great. I mean, a temptation might be to kind of contact a big publisher organization and sign your work up to them, and they do take a lot of the heavy lifting, but then they take the lion's share of the pie as well. So was it an active decision to try and do a lot of this or all of it yourself and through your own means, like commissioning your own art and things like that? Was that a very active choice?
Yeah, I come from like a background of being a bit of an anarcho-punk, and working with big corporations just rubs me the wrong way. The minute it becomes too corporate, I stop. I start having like an aversion to it. So that's part of it. I think also, when it comes to the books, I want them to look a certain way. I want to work with really cool artists. So, I want to make sure that there's no AI art used. I want to make sure it's all like indie art, and I want to work with artists who maybe haven't had platforms before, or and getting to do that and organizing it myself. Where I have worked with others and done some commission writing, you have so little control of the end product, even like how your writing gets edited, that it can feel very like, the end thing that you made came out very different to what you started it as, and you don't really have a lot of say in that process. So by keeping things the way they are, it means that I can kind of have more say in them. I can be more kind of true to what I wanted to create, but also, the community can feed direct into things. So there's elements in the books and the games that came directly from community suggestions, to the point of like literally like someone will mention something in the Discord and it just gets immediately added to a game, and that becomes the next thing that comes out. You could just be a lot more responsive to your community and people that are playing the games as well. And I get to work with really cool artists and go find people I love the art of and just pay them to make me some cool stuff, which is awesome as well.
That's nice. So let's talk about, before we'll finish up on art, if that's okay, because I think that's probably the bit that I'm most excited to, and alongside your amazing rules as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the rules are particularly take or leave the ruls, but the artwork's amazing. I'm not saying that. But let's talk about The Last War, because I see that I've not actually played The Last War myself, but when I saw it, when I read about it, it. I'm excited about it, and I think it could prove to be like a bridge game for lots of people, because a lot of people play historical tabletop games. A lot of people play, skirmish-sized games, and there's a few kind of Great War or World War II skirmish games around, but this one's definitely got a unique slant, which I don't think will be too difficult for people to get into with minis that they already have. So talk to us a little bit about The Last War and what that is.
Yeah, so the Last War came out of after I did Forbidden Psalm. I asked the community, hey, what setting would you like me to take these rules to? Like, is there a theme or a setting that appeals to you more? And World War One was by far and above the one that everyone asked for. So I started writing The Last War and pulling together this rule set, and it has the same core principles as Forbidden Psalm. Skirmish warband of 5 characters. They have floors, feats, equipment. They get injuries. They can die. You can replace them. All that kind of stuff. And you do, this narrative campaign. Set it in a non-historical World War One, so it's inspired by World War One, but it specifically doesn't, mention the Brits, the Germans, or Russians, or anything like that. It's just a trench war that's going on, and essentially the world has ended everywhere but the trenches. So all that's left is the trenches. The world around it seems to have vanished in a fog. And you are the remnants of soldiers or civilians that got caught up in this, trying to survive by just looting through the trenches, dealing with people who've refused to accept the war has ended, so they're called the loyal, dealing with monsters and horrible things that have come out of the fog, from things like trench maggots to weird werewolves and things like that. And you are, really low on equipment. It's kind of your characters are scavenging and trying to survive. It's almost survival horror-esque in that way. You take on missions for someone called the Quartermaster, who sends you out into the trenches to help gather items. You're trying to build a tank, a World War One tank, so that you can try and escape the fog and see if there's anything beyond it. And yeah, that's kind of the game. So very thematically World War One, in terms of like its aesthetic, its equipment, all that kind of stuff. But actual setting, and then the lore of the setting is left quite open for interpretation. So people have used it to use 40k minis and play a trench war style game. They've used it to use Krieg minis and stuff like that. And they've also then gone all the way and used World War One themed minis and build whole trench boards for it as well. So it's kind of inspired quite a lot of community involvement and kit bashing. Off the success of it, War Games Atlantic, I got talking to them. They actually did a box set with the game in and sprues of their World War One minis that you can still pick up from War Games Atlantic. And yeah, that was kind of the setting and the game. We ran a Kickstarter for it. It did pretty successful on Kickstarter, and it's just kind of I think it's become the second best-selling one in the range of the Forbidden Psalm games. People really like that World War One weird war aesthetic, and
it's a great setting, isn't it? 'Cause it would have been rubbish, just being in that. It's terrible, just harrowing times, right? And I just think if you mixed up with that, it's just terrible as it is, with all the kind of bodies and noises and smells, and I've had just a really, really terrible experience. Would you moving it from, you mentioned that it was World War One inspired, but not kind of historically accurate, not mentioning certain things. How much do you think the setting means for your games compared to the feeling? Because you're talking about before, you talk about with DMing and GMing, where it was like you want people to have a great time, you want to facilitate people having fun stories, but there's two settings which are, with Forbidden Psalm and The Last War, like really really bad, so what's in, is there anything in that, is there anything specific about why you've picked two terrible settings, and yet there's a certain joviality or a certain positivity with the storytelling that's in there?
Yeah, so I think part of it might speak to the fact that I worked in climate change for a while and I ended up writing all games about the end of the world. It might be connected. I think it's also that thing of like finding the fun in misery. These are miserable settings. So Last War is absolutely abhorrent as a place to be. But it's very tongue-in-cheek. There is silly things in there. Some of the flaws and feature characters get are purposefully lighthearted, and some of the stories that then come out of it are as well. And it's again, it goes to that thing of fun and failure. You know, if it was all sunshine and roses, there isn't any fun to be had in failure in a world that looks like that. Whereas when the world's already so miserable, you can almost like have that gallows humor about what's happening to the characters that you're playing as.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's part of where it comes from, that I have this the world is a horrific nightmare at the moment, and has been for some time, and only seems to be getting worse, and with an understanding of what's to come with climate doesn't bode very well. So trying to find joy amongst that misery has been,
I think, I'm not sure if I'm looking I'm not sure if I'm looking too much into it. When you say fun through failure, I just thought, life, that's what life is. I think was it Winston Churchill that said success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. Is along those lines. And so I think, is there any intentional life lessons in this, or is it there's no allegory here?
I think there is, like, whether I meant it or not. I think my career has been that I've spent my career working on societal issues that universally don't get better, and the joke in the charity sector is that you're working to make yourself redundant, because if you solve the problem you're working on, you shouldn't need to exist. If society fixes the issues, these charities go away, but actually the need has only ever got greater. And climate change is a perfect example, where with all the activity and noise and protests and everything about climate change, the climate's only got worse, and we're only trending one way. And having to find a way to get through that and keep your enthusiasm, to keep the fight going, to try and make a change, make a difference, and improve things, without that kind of humor, without that ability to find joy in those moments, you lose the plot, and you kind of descend into nihilism. So I think that's definitely part of the games, of like trying to the joy in trying to make it through not necessarily nice situations. And how you do it, and
the joy of trying. Saying this. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the kind of cool concepts in the game is that you can play co-op, solo, or versus, and you can alternate between those. So as you're playing versus, you can decide to start playing cooperatively. There's NPC monsters and horrible things that you're actually better off if you work together to deal with, but you can choose to be horrible to each other and kill each other, or you can choose to work together, and kind of it's left open to the players to decide that. And how they approach it. So even that is like an element of that game of like, actually, look, there's joy in community, there's joy in coming together, and there's joy and laughter when you miserably fail.
That's really cool, man. That's awesome. So as we kind of unfortunately begin to round out, let's kind of sum up Forbidden Psalm and also Last War. What are you kind of most proud about, or what you're most chuffed about, or maybe something that's a really big positive that was unexpected in both of those games? Is there anything that really jumps out to you as like, that was great?
I think I might have mentioned it already, but like the fact that players kind of got what I was aiming for. Because there's always that fear of like, is this going to come across the way I want it to come across? Is this going to, engage people the way I was hoping it would? And then I think the other positivity that I've had is the amount of people that have messaged me saying it's the first game they've come back to after leaving the hobby for a long time. And it's like enthused them again to come back. The amount of people that have told me they've played it with like a partner or a child or a friend, and it's like regalvanized kind of their hobby together. I actually got to meet a couple who it was their first miniatures game that they ever played together at Salute that I went to recently, and they were telling me stories of their characters and what their characters got up to, and how one of them had in Last War you can have a service animal, and one of them can be a cat. But the cats can eat people's faces, of course. And they were telling me how they kept doing that, and their cat became this unstoppable, horrifying monster, as all cats should be. And the joy that they had in their eyes while they're telling me this horrific story about a cat eating people's faces, it was just wonderful. And just brought joy to my heart that through some absolutely horrible ideas that I had, these people had brought so much joy. And those kind of comments and that kind of positivity of the experience people have with the game, and seeing the kind of joy and enthusiasm people have for this thing I created is like the greatest drug. It's just such a high that makes it worthwhile doing it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, two more areas, if I may. I'm always very conscious of time, and I don't want to outstay my welcome. But I've got two more areas to talk about, if that's all right. And the first one is art. So, as I've kind of looked on the website and done the research and kind of like mentioned, I've interacted with Forbidden Psalm before, and Last War is on the list. The artwork seems to really. It seems to be really deep. It kind of, a little bit like a fishing rod, it kind of pulls you in, and it really evokes the world. So you mentioned that it was, you, and you were getting out there, and you were finding artists, and you were commissioned artists that you really enjoyed and appreciated. So who are the main artists that you work with? How did you find them? And what was it about their work that you thought was, yes, this matches over, like an overlay of the world that I'm trying to create?
Yeah, so it's a variety of different kind of ways I found artists, but essentially in my head I get this like theme for the game and the setting and how I want it to look and come across. I'll usually create a couple pieces myself that might or might not end up in the final book. Some of them have, some of them were more for like inspiration for what I would then go and seek out. And then it was a case of doing open calls for artists from the community. So that's where it started, is literally people who play the tabletop games, Morkborg, and then miniatures games. I would put out calls via Discords and social medias and say, look, I'm looking for artists, send me your stuff. I would go through, create what I thought matched the best, talk to those artists. I have a very free-form relationship with artists where it's like I give them a basic concept and say, draw me what comes to mind. And then they come back, and 99% of the time it's been spot on. I'm not one of those people that goes in and says, I need you to draw this exact thing in this exact way. It must exactly look like this. And then we go through 15 iterations. Not a fan of working like that with people. I much prefer seeing what they bring to the table as well. So it becomes a bit more of a collaborative process in that sense. With the Endless Horrors book, the one we did, which I've not talked that much about yet, it's the one where you play as a cult trying to end the world. And one of the first things you do in the game is you generate your own kind of elder god that you're going to worship and your cult's going to worship. And there's a 3D100 tables to help you generate your own god. And what we did is we rolled 10 times on that, and we just gave those prompts to the artist, Vil, and just said, draw whatever comes to mind. And the art in the book is entirely those prompts that we gave to try and invoke, like, here's the weird and wonderful, horrifying monsters that you're going to summon and worship. So some of it is doing weird and wacky things like that. And then, the artists I work with, so Vil is someone I've worked with a lot, Brazilian artist who just does like absolutely horrifying but also really interesting and detailed work. Then there's Boris Monsell, who's done work recently with me, done some absolutely fantastic work across a couple of games. 28 Psalms they just did a lot of work for. Last War was a variety of different artists, including my own kids have submitted art for it, and they've got art in the books. There's some of mine in there. There's art from I'm trying to remember his name, not his handle. Anton Provost, that's it. Who's done some really, again, like kind of weird and wonderful black line work on things like the Barbed Wire Beast and Ghost of No Man's Land. And then Bertie, who did the cover art for Last War, I've done quite a bit with him. And then got to work with some other artists more recently on upcoming projects. I'm going to butcher the handle, but it's Sophoril, I think. They've done the artwork for a game coming up called Dark Ages of Anwin and Run for the Dark, 2 games that we're working on at the moment. And their stuff is, they sent me the originals, and it is so detailed. I have no idea how they achieve the look they do. It's absolutely beautiful. So it's just wonderful to get to work with so many different artists from the community, independent artists. Getting to pay them is actually a real privilege, and it feels actually very heartwarming to actually be able to help these people in their careers, but also then get wonderful art and horrible things that are in my head, getting other people to make them come to life. It's also just it's really satisfying.
Cool, man. That's really cool. How much do you think of, because working within a charity, within that industry, you no doubt having to network, speak to, organize, Challenge, Chivy, all these different people. If you think about like a charity event or a charitable organization, even something like it might be a bake sale, for example, this is something that a charity may or may not do, right? There's a lot of moving parts that need to come together in the same place at the same time. Do you think that working in that industry has helped you to work in the way that you like working now, where you're bringing all these artists and you're doing the writing yourself, doing some drawing yourself? Do you think that's kind of helped you?
Yeah, it definitely has, because I think the charity sector also has this, like, very much, you have a job in the charity sector, but you do 50 other things on top of it, because everybody has to chip in, because no charity's got enough money for actually what it wants to do. So you become a bit of a jack of all trades. You learn how to do things as cheaply as you can, as kind of frugally, but also while respecting people. And with the artists I work with, some of them, they don't charge enough. Like, they put their own rates too low, so then we do things like build into the Kickstarter that if we make a certain goal, we'll pay them double and stuff like that. And yeah, just that whole approach is a very community-oriented charity sector way of approaching things. It means I'm terrible at giving stuff away for free and not really valuing it, and then when you suddenly have to pay bills with it doesn't always gel, and you suddenly have to be like, I need to be a bit more business focused, which I'm not good at doing. And this year, like, I've had to kind of try to be a bit more of that, but I still kind of suck at it. And yeah, so I think it definitely is that approach of like all hands on deck, trying to do things in a way that's community orientated,
like a social enterprise.
Yeah, and sometimes not even like, there have been big publishers I've spoken to, but actually working with them doesn't necessarily comply with the ethos that I want. So yeah, and then it's funny because then sometimes people get really corporate all of a sudden, it just like makes me really turn off of working with them. And like,
I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's hard, isn't it? Because I think it's one of them things that it's like one of working in that corporate environment. And again, I'm not criticizing it necessarily, but I find it really uneasy working in that environment. And you've got to be very careful, because if you start working in those areas and start mixing in those circles, it's kind of like one of your legs gets shortened by 6 inches, so you're expecting to walk straight, but you've got one leg that's 6 inches shorter, and it's very easy to start going off the trail that you thought that you were on, right? And so have you got any kind of like fail safes? Have you got any kind of things that you stick to or try and remember, so that you're making sure that you're staying on the track that you've created for yourself, especially as you moved into doing it full time?
Yeah, a lot of it is just like, how do I feel about it? In the sense of like, does this create any unease within me, and like the ethics I hold? And if it does, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. And I've definitely had times where that's happened, where I've had to pull back from something or not work on a partnership. There was a miniatures maker I was working with who suddenly started using AI art in their promotion. And I was like, can't do that. AI for me is a no-go. Sorry. And like, still love the company. No bad blood there. It's just, that's a thing that I've made a stand against before. I'd be a hypocrite now suddenly to like take the cash that's being generated using it. So, turn down a paid gig to stick to those ethics, because it would have made me feel uneasy to do otherwise. And they were great about it. They totally understood my point of view, and they generally still don't hold any ill will or anything there. It's just the way you're approaching doing this work doesn't align with what feels right to me, and I'm gonna have to walk away from it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Right, so as we kind of bring it to a close, unfortunately, and I'll definitely like to extend an invite in the future to kind of have a deeper delve into individual games, and we can talk about specific mechanics and specific features and all that kind of stuff. If you would like to come on, that'd be amazing. But we'll wrap up with, like, where can we go right now? So if someone's onion has been pickled, if somebody's attention has been piqued by something that we've spoken to, like, where can we go to find out more about your games? And also, what is the future holding? Because you've already alluded to a couple of other irons that are in the fire, right?
Yeah. You can find the games by just going to forbiddensarm.com. That's got all the info and bump about each of the individual games, as well as where you can pick them up. If you're in the US, you can get them from a place called Space Penguin Inc. If you're in the UK, you can buy them direct from my store online. They are in retailers around the place, so you can find them sometimes as well. And
you get them in China. I forgot to mention this before. Like, I live in China, and you can buy them. I was checking out the other day. I got a couple of things in my basket. You can buy them over here. Did you know that? Did you know
really?
That
I did not know I was in China. That's
yeah.
How did I end up in China? That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I was checking it out. So you can go on US, UK hubs. Is there like, obviously bricks and mortar stores too? Yeah, you find that they're in stores too.
Yeah, so in stores, various stores have various of the products. The Wargames Atlantic box set, for example, is wherever you can buy Wargames Atlantic's products. And then also games cons and conventions, particularly in the UK. I try to get to a couple of them each year now, and my publisher, Space Penguin, kind of goes out to the ones stateside. And then if you want digital versions, they're all on DriveThruRPG or itch.io. Obviously much cheaper if you want that. You also have my permission to print them and do whatever you want with them. Pick them up as cheaply as you can. We've also got a free rule set called 28 Psalms, which is a stripped back version of the core rule set with some settings and scenarios, as well as it's got a different setting and theme to the other games. So it's like kind of industrial, grimdarky, sci-fi setting. And that's a complete free version that you can download. We actually ran a Kickstarter just for print versions of it recently, but the PDFs are entirely for free. You can get those on the website. You can also get them on the drive-thru and the itch.io as well. So you can check it out there. I've got, all the other things. I've got a Patreon going on where we share work in progress and do monthly scenarios for people that people vote on. We've got a Instagram. There's a Discord channel, which you can all find linked from the website as well.
What is a link from to Patreon on the website? Cool, nice, awesome. That's really, really cool. So what about the future then? Doing it full time, you've obviously got a little bit more time, a little bit more brain power to dedicate to this. So what might the future hold?
Yeah, so we've got, I always work on a couple projects at a time. I've kind of hacked my ADHD to be, I can procrastinate on one project by working on something else. So I tend to have 3 or 4 things on the go at a time. So the 3 projects on the go at the moment and their various dates is Hope is for the Dead, which is a survival zombie game coming out in June to Kickstarter, which is taking the Forbidden Psalm rules and putting a survival horror spin on it, where you are trying to create a haven, trying to keep the haven going. So you start with 25 names on a roster. You play still with only 5 minis, but as they die, you pull from that roster. And if your roster ever runs out of characters, your haven has fallen. And you're dealing with zombies and trying to not generate too much noise during scenarios. There's no store to buy equipment from, so you have to scavenge everything you're using. You can upgrade stuff, all that kind of jazz. So that's coming out. It's going to hit Kickstarter in June, and then the playtest version's actually on my Patreon at the moment. We've then got, probably towards the end of the year, an actual roleplay game instead of a miniatures game. There will be a Forbidden Psalm supplement for it for those that still want it, but that's called Run for the Dark, which is a kind of Welsh folklore inspired horror game about things that go bump in the dark and trying to stay away from them as best you can. I've done a game with Blaster magazine, they've done games with other people might know of Blaster. We've done a game called Dark Ages of Anwin that they're putting out sometime in the next few months. They're still working out their dates and things. I think they've got a sign up to be notified Kickstarter page for it at the moment. So I wrote the rules, they've done the layout, we've worked with an artist together, so that's a collaborative game. It's coming out this year, and then next year we've got a game I've spoken about a few times, but it's kind of my long burn project, which is Legitimate Salvage, which is the sci-fi version of Forbidden Psalm that will be coming out sometime next year whenever I actually finish it. It originally was going to be a rip on the Mothership roleplay game, but then got completely rewritten, and that's why it's taken longer. And then that'll be next year.
mate, awesome. Busy. You got busy times ahead then. It's amazing. That's cool, man. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for, taking a chance on us, coming onto the show, listening to the questions, having a bit of a chat. I really appreciate it. I've had a great time talking to you. I don't want to outstay my welcome. I know that you're a busy guy and you got a lot of stuff to do, but thanks a lot for your time, Will. We really appreciate it, and maybe we'll speak to you again in the future soon.
Yeah, I'd love to come on again. It's been great to chat, and more than happy to come back. It's been awesome.
An extended camp woo there. Episode 241 all wrapped up. There you go. That's an episode for you. What's been going on? Let's not talk about that yet. Let's talk about Will. What a nice guy. What a great guy. What a rich and interesting story. Like I said, man, during the show, just holding down a job and studying and a family. Man, he's rocking it. I just think about those 3 or 4 years that he was probably at university, doing his university degree and working and got a family. And to come through that with such a positive and chipper attitude that he has there, awesome. Really, really good. And that's just one thing. He's had such a rich, deep, interesting and kind of boulder-strewn path that he's managed to navigate and go through. Just a really interesting chap. Even just talking about Cardiff and his interest in kind of viewpoint on Cardiff as a city, and he walks around the place and he doesn't have a car. Just interesting stuff, really interesting stuff, really, really great guy. And that's one thing that's great about the hobby, something that's really great about Paint All the Minis podcast stuff, because you just get to meet people like Will, and I think the world's a better place for people like Will, and long may that continue. Thank you, Will, if you're still listening. If you're a post rambler, Will, thank you, and hopefully you'll get you on again in the future, and we can ask you some different questions and kind of see what your mindset is, because it's always interesting to hear different people's perspectives, opinions and observations. But yeah, hobby week. What's been going on for me? Hobby week. Still munching through the Queen's Men. 36 Queen's Men. I'm looking at them now. I might be coming through in different angles because I'm just got my laptop screen in front of the Queen's Men. I'm starting to get sick of the sight of them. I'm not going to lie. Starting to get a bit sick of the sight of them now. 36 of these guys. Pretty much there with them. Started to get the basing material on. Final little details, like I put like a little ruby gemstone in the hilt of their swords. General arse in a boot with those ones, but hopefully that'll be finished this week. I'm going to kind of move on to some archers. I've got some guys, don't know what they're called, fire arrowy Baratheon guys. I'll be moving on to those. Kind of want a little bit of a palette cleanser, I think, so I've started to paint some V Sabotage, V Commandos guys in the meantime. If you haven't ever checked out V Sabotage, as it's called now, V Commandos as it was before, awesome game, really, really good fun if you're into that kind of solo or co-op experience of like kind of stealth and sneaking around and trying to avoid guards. If you like 0 to 100 hours that Graham Davey was on last episode, the Graham Davey episode, he's got a game called 0 to 100 hours. It's very much the same idea as V Commandos, V Sabotage, although V Sabotage is more of a board-based game. Get on it. V Commandos, V Sabotage is one of my all-time favorite games. It's really, really good. So yeah, I've been painting some minis for that. A mortarman, a medic, and a spy, a German spy. I've been doing that. Nothing else hobby-wise playing. I got beat in the weekly league, War Chest League. Mr. Snowman Dan beat me. I'd like to say that he hadn't won a game until he played me, so I kind of threw the game to make him feel better, but I didn't. He genuinely actually beat me, which was awesome. I love War Chest because it's a very interesting game, and it's always builds for close, tight affairs, which is always good. And that league is coming to an end in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in getting involved in our weekly league, swing by the Discord server. Just also noticed again, I forgot to mention the Discord server in the intro. It's a good job I'm not getting paid for this, innit? Because I keep on forgetting to promote myself. But yeah, so yeah, if you're not, you probably are. If you're a post rambler, you probably are in the Discord server. But if you're in the Discord server, you've not been in there for a while, or you're not been kicking around, give the next league a try. Even if you're not played on Board Game Arena, which is free, or Tabletop Simulator, which is not free, but all of the individual games on Tabletop Simulator are free. Have a look around. If you want a practice game of anything, give me a shout, and I'll come and help you out with it, and I'll get you up and running with it. I'll teach you all the hotkeys and all the bits and bobs that I know, and we can learn and muddle through together. But yeah, so yeah, it's good because you're able to play games with people who you really want to play games with, but maybe don't live close to you. So sometimes we just play games with people that just in our proximity. And if you really like playing with those people, that's great, that's amazing. But living where I live, the kind of cast of characters that want to play games with me is very, very small. So what Tabletop Simulator allows me to do, and what Board Games Arena allows me to do, is to play with you guys, and we all kind of share the similar mindset, you know. So it's just really good fun. So our War Chest League is coming to an end. We're starting to think about our next league, and there's also lots of board games that you might not necessarily have played, which give a similar feeling, similar thought as a lot of war games. You still get that kind of thinky, strategy, planny kind of stuff, but without all of the minis and the moving around and the 4 hours. So if you're just looking to get a game midweek and try something new and try something different, then you know, I'm kind of like laying this on with a trial. But you know, come swing by. It's free, and you can just play with us and hopefully have a good time, and it's great. But anyway, that's kind of what I've been doing, really, kind of playing games, painting these fucking queens, men, and that's pretty much it. Hobby-wise, anything else hobby-wise? No, I think that's pretty much it. But it's not about me, it's about the community, and it's about what you guys have been up to. So make sure you swing by and tell us what you've been up to. Thanks to Mr. Dave Xavier. Well, I've never actually asked him if it's Dave Javier or Dave Xavier, but he put together another article for the Paint All the Minis website, and also Post Ramblers. If you've got an idea for an article, a video, some sort of content that you've been rattling around your brain for ages, but you don't have anywhere to host it, let me know, because we would love to host your ideas, your passion, your enthusiasm on the Paint All the Minis website. So just hit me up on whatever medium is appropriate for you. And we can set you up. We don't have high standards, you know. We don't, you know. And if you send us a largely coherent article that's not, you know, offensive to everyone, just if offensive to some people, then we'll throw it up there and just shine the light on you, because you know, it takes a lot to run a website and all that kind of stuff, and you don't want to make a website for just one article. So we just want, you know, to create content for the community that's interesting. So if you've got an idea for kicking around, give us a shout, because we'd love to host it. We'd love to kind of shine a light on you and promote you and give you a platform so you can shine your light on the hobby community. But yeah, that's enough of the post ramble. Until next time we're together, keep shining your light on everyone.